Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth-generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone. So one thing that I like is actually creating analogies or metaphors, kind of visual images in my mind that kind of connect to different areas of life or different struggles that I'm going through. And so for today, I want to talk about basically dealing with fog or brain fog or lack of clarity. Essentially what we're going to associate this with is lack of clarity. But what I was thinking about the other day is I was driving in fog. I left my place, I went outside and it was super foggy out. And I had to go drive, it wasn't very far, just a few miles. But it just got me to thinking about this whole fog and literally driving into fog and what it's like, and kind of wanted to kind of talk through that and kind of create this picture and how we can associate that to basically lack of clarity and where we struggle with fog in different areas of our life. And so I want to talk about this a little bit. So essentially, think about what it's like when you're driving through fog. And I feel like here lately or recently, we've actually had a fair amount of fog. We've had quite a few foggy days. And so think about that. And just that alone seems like we tend to have those foggy days in our mind where we're dealing with lack of clarity or we're stuck and we feel like it's hard for us to actually see moving forward. And it seems like those kind of happen sometimes kind of boom, boom, boom. Like we have a few of them in a row and then we go, quite a while without them and we're good. And we think, oh, the fog's gone. And then all of a sudden it comes back. There's always going to be times where it comes back, and we're always going to have to be dealing with these different struggles where it causes us to have, fog or, like I said, lack of clarity. Probably going to be mentioned on that a few times. But so essentially, I was driving down and what it looks like from fog, and I always wish I could see fog, from a 30,000 foot view to see what it's actually look like, because I feel like fog is very interesting because you'll have certain areas where it's super foggy, maybe down on the bottom where it's super foggy, and all of a sudden you get up to the hill and you can see. Or all of a sudden you drive 3-4 miles in one direction and it's clear. And so I feel like it's pretty easy when you're driving in the fog and it's be like, wow, I can really thick fog. I can barely see in front of me. Like, how am I going to keep moving forward? Or maybe it's a light fog and just like, well, it's a little tricky, but I can manage. I'm familiar with the area. I can manage. I can get through this. And then you struggle through it and you kind of make it out on the other end. And like I said, usually it's when you're kind of down in the bottom, kind of down in that pit, kind of the pit of wherever the struggle that you're going through, and you have to climb the hill. You have to climb the hill to get out of that fog. And you have to, once you get up that hill, you get to the clearing, and all of a sudden you can see clearly. And I feel like that's the other thing is kind of going back to, if you're familiar to where you're at, if you're on a road, you're like, well, I can kind of use my surroundings. I can know what I'm familiar with. I can keep moving forward and I can muddle my way through this. Now I was thinking back to this is actually last December where we had a lot of foggy days and we were actually out fertilizing. I was out in the middle of the field in the dark of all things. And it was so foggy. It was super thick, and I'm in the middle of the field. I had no idea. If I had to turn around, I would not know which direction I was going. If it were not for the GPS or the auto steer that I was using on the tractor, or the familiarity of the field to a certain extent. If I was in somebody else's field, dealing with hills or just unfamiliar territory, I would be screwed. I would have been lost. And I feel like that tends to happen in different areas of our life, to kind of take this back to different things that we struggle with. If you're going through an area of life, going through a challenge, and you hit fog, you hit lack of clarity, you hit basically something that you're not used to, it's so easy for us to not know which direction to turn to not know where to turn to. And so, taking this back to having a road or a path or something to kind of take you in the right direction. So that way, even though it's tough, even though it's a struggle to see, you at least have, the road, something you could stick to that you keep moving forward to kind of help you take you out of this fog and the lack of clarity. And so that's one thing there that like, I feel like it's important for us to realize that we need to create some sort of road. You know, if we've never been there before, say if we're out in the middle of the field, we've never been in this situation before, we cannot see which direction we're going, we don't know which way is north, where we need to go. You need to somehow find your way to the edge of the field, find yourself to a road. We need to create a plan, create a path, so that way we can keep moving forward and work ourselves up the hill, back out of this, and so that way we can get out of the fog, basically. And so when it comes to fog or lack of clarity, the one thing that I think about is uncertainty. Uncertainty, because I feel like a lack of clarity breeds basically this uncertainty in our mind, where we get in this fog and where it's super thick and we're not really sure which way we're going. We're like, well, I think this is the way to go. We're kind of uncertain. Or maybe you're in, like I said, an unfamiliar area. Even if you come up to an intersection, you got 3 ways to go. You got 3 ways to pick. You got to make a choice. You got to basically figure out which way you're going to turn to. And that creates basically some scarcity in our mind. The scarcity because we don't know the outcome. We don't know which one's going to be the right direction to turn to, or which, if the choice that we're going to make is going to be right. And so I feel like that basically creates some scarcity in our mind. So the one thing when it comes to scarcity, the one phrase that I want to mention here that you should always remember, because it's something that's stuck with me, is clarity kills scarcity. So you're probably thinking in your mind, well, how am I supposed to get clarity when I got all this fog? Well, that's what we're talking about here. That's what we're going to try to address, is we need to basically make a plan. We need to come up with a plan of action. And so I want to kind of talk about some things that, I'm trying to work through, or things that I think could be a good thing to work through as well, is when it comes to these different areas, is basically you need to, like I said before, find a road, find a path, a direction to kind of to where you're trying to go, essentially. When it comes to business, especially when we're talking about this fog, this lack of clarity, I feel like just having that vision, that direction, if you can kind of keep that, kind of a plan, maybe a plan of attack. We're always going to have these fog events. We're going to have these brain fog, these lack of clarity, these scarcity events come up. So maybe let's try to be proactive. Let's try to figure out, what are we going to do when this happens? When this happens, maybe on the business side, maybe it's on the financial side of things in business. You're getting a lot of scarcity, lack of clarity. You're getting a lot of fog. You're not really sure what's going on. You got markets going every which direction, and you just need to figure this out. Well, you need to ask yourself, what are the facts? That's one thing I'm always going to come back to, is what are the facts? And so then you need to find some clarity in that. Clarity is going to kill scarcity. So how do you find clarity? Well, you need to dive into your numbers. You need to dive into figuring out where the issue is at, and try to actually focus on your finances, because your finances can breed a lot of clarity if you actually focus on them. And what does clarity do? Clarity kills scarcity. So that's what we're trying to do. And so I think that's a very important one to focus on. So the other thing that I'm going to ask, though, is, where does this fog come from? Obviously we can't answer that for Mother Nature and everything that comes through in the real world. But where does fog come from in your mind? Brain fog, a lack of clarity. Where does that come from? And I feel like for me, when I was thinking about this, is usually what happens is some sort of event. Some sort of event happens in our life. Something comes up where, like I said, maybe it's the markets. The markets are running all over the place, or maybe they're dropping down. The bottom's falling out, and you just have lots of negative days. And so you're thinking in your mind, you're reading a lot of scarcity because you don't know exactly where you're at. That's an event, something that happens that essentially triggers a story. Events trigger stories. Events trigger stories. And so that's one thing that, what is the story? Ask yourself, what is the story that's going through your head? And try to get really clear on the story. And then from there we can maybe address the story. Now, where did the story come from? For me, maybe the story comes from when we've got a down day in the markets, or whatever your business consists of, we got a down day. And that story comes from, all the previous struggles that I went through in the past with my business. So you got a story that's running through your mind saying, this is a down day, man, we're going to lose a lot of money on this. Corn's going to $3.50 or $3, and it's just tanking, and we're going to lose a piss load of money on this, and we're not going to be profitable. We're going to owe money to the bank, and this is going to breed all sorts of scarcity and lack of, just all sorts of stories going through your mind because of this one event that basically triggered a story. The events trigger stories. And so from there, you've got these stories going through your mind. And so we need to get clear on that story. And essentially, we need to change that story. If we want to try to find some sort of clarity, try to regain our mind, essentially, when our mind runs rampant with these stories that come up, we need to try to change that story. So we need to ask ourselves, what are the facts? What can we control? And let's try to change that story. Try to change the story so it's positive. Try to change the story so you have a better perspective on things. And so, okay, maybe the story is, well, we're going to lose money this year because the finances are crashing, or the grain market's crashing. We're going to owe a bunch of money. We're going to lose a bunch of money. And, my fear is we're not going to be able to farm on next year. And that's the fear. Okay, so what are the facts? Maybe the fact is we need to maybe dive back into the numbers and you look at things. Okay, we've gone down 25 cents. But maybe the fact is you've actually got a really good year and crops look really good. So we're going to have maybe 25 bushel an acre better than our APH or whatever our projections were. So, okay, total revenue, maybe it's pretty similar. Okay, we're going to be all right. Okay, let's maybe face the facts in the story that it is going to be negative. It is going to be negative. You're going to lose maybe 50,000, whatever the number is. We got to find that number first, but we need to get clear on what things actually look like. And that's part of the story, is maybe get very clear. Okay, now you ask yourself, what can you do about it? What can you control? From there, then we try to make a plan of attack. That plan is essentially that road. It might be an uphill road because the odds are you're probably in a bottom. You're probably in a pit. In your mind, you're in a pit. Because that's kind of one thing that I've learned is when it comes to these stories, you have an event or story, a trigger, and then your mind goes into a pit. And it's really hard to find ourselves out of a pit. But essentially, there's always going to be a plan or a road that you can try to find. Try to think of the road that you're on when you're driving, through the countryside and you hit all this fog. You're still on a road. You stay on that road and try to find this plan of attack. What can you control? And then think about that. Think about what you can control. And so from there, we could try to actually create a plan of attack. Okay, well, I'm going to be negative 50,000, but I can do this, that, and the other thing. And, we're going to be okay. We're going to survive. We're going to make it through. And from there, we can actually kind of kill that story a little bit. Face the facts and try to kill that story a little bit and create a new story. Like, okay, the market's going down. My brain's going into it. This trigger happened. My brain's going into the pit. I'm seeing a lot of fog, lots of lack of clarity. The lack of clarity is breeding, uncertainty. So let's get clear about this. What are the facts? The fact is I may lose 50,000. Okay, that's the fact. Now let's create a new story. Well, from this, I can make adjustments in my business. I can not spend money on this, or I can maybe sell this, or maybe I can try to plan for some different marketing tactics that can get me some of that money back. From there, you can make a plan. And from there, you actually find clarity. The clarity kills scarcity. That's kind of the one thing that I was thinking about through driving all this fog. It's kind of funny how your brain goes from this to that to the other thing, and your brain kind of just spirals, and you think about just all these different things. And so that's one thing where I tried to paint that picture, that image in our head, something that we can relate to, and something that we've all been through. Now, the one thing I want to say is these can happen. You can get these foggy or basically lack of clarity events in our body, our being, and our balance. The core four that I mentioned before. Core four, they can happen in each area of our life. And so it's important to kind of use the same strategy and tactic to really go through whenever you get this fog or lack of clarity, whether it's in body, being, balance, or business, to really remember this to try to help you through that. And the other thing that I also want to mention here is I feel like it's really easy, and I should have maybe mentioned this at the beginning, but it's pretty easy when we're driving around the countryside and, maybe like I said, we're driving through fog. We've gone through the uphill rise to get out of the fog, and we get to this clearing, 3, 4, 5 miles away, 10 miles away, whatever it is, and you see your neighbor who has not had fog, and you look back in the struggle, the last 10 miles that you've been driving through, and you roll up to your neighbors and he's not dealing with fog, and you ask yourself, well, why did I have to deal with this? Why did I have to deal with this struggle? Well, I can guarantee you at some point or another, whether it may seem like he's not going through anything, whether it may seem like he's not dealing with any fog or uncertainty or any struggles or challenges, at some point or another, he's going to have the fog on his side in that part of the country. And they're always going to have something to deal with. And so it's just important to remember that there's a reason that you have to drive through that fog, is because eventually, once you drive up that hill and you reach that clearing, when that fog rises and the fog lifts, you're sitting on top of that hill and everything's crystal clear. Kind of think back to that feeling that when you've been driving through fog and it's intense, you're gripping the steering wheel. I don't know what this is going to be like. Let's just keep moving forward. Let's push through. And all of a sudden you get out and it's just like this weight is lifted. And this weight is lifted. You can see clearly. And it's that vision that we're trying to shoot for. And we've got to remember that vision. Because without that, I guarantee your neighbor, if he wakes up that morning and he didn't have to drive through the fog and go through the struggles and challenges of trying to get there and all the lack of clarity and the scarcity and all that, he doesn't know what he actually has. He doesn't realize the clear vision, the clear view, not having to go through the fog. He's not as grateful for that. So that's just kind of one thing that I was thinking about, is we need to remember that there's a reason that we have to go through this. Whether we know it or not, we typically do not know it. There's a reason that we have to go through some of these foggy events and these lack of clarity events. But there's definitely ways to work through them, definitely ways to get through the issues. Part of that is by trying to find a road, trying to find a sense of direction, maybe a vision, more or less, to paint that picture in your head to what that's going to look like once you climb that hill and you can actually see the clearing and you can actually see everything clearly. And that's what you're shooting for. That's the vision. That's what's going to keep you on the road. But then also basically an event and a trigger and a story. Let's realize, be aware of those different things so we can gain control of those and actually ask ourselves, what can we control? That's kind of what you can use for a plan of attack and whenever these situations happen, because they're going to happen. Let's be honest. There's always going to be times where we get very brain fog and this lack of clarity. I feel like I'm rambling on here, and so I really hope this makes sense to you, maybe resonates to you. Maybe you're currently going through fog. The other thing that I forgot to mention, and real quick here, because I think this is important, is like I mentioned before in the field, when I was basically lost in this field, I had a GPS, I had guidance, I had auto steer, and that was really what helped me through. That was a tool. And essentially that's what we need, is maybe a tool or even a mentor, maybe somebody to kind of help us through that we can reach out to. Maybe when we're in the middle of the road, we can call and say, hey, I'm not familiar with this. I've never been here before, but this is kind of your part of the world, countryside. This is what I'm seeing, but it's foggy. I still can't really find my way. What do I got to do? And then that person can help you through, more or less. I'm very big on kind of mentorship or having somebody to kind of help you through these issues. And so it's very important to find somebody that can help you through, somebody that's gonna help you through those different challenges. And essentially here, that's what Pioneer Farmer does. That's what we do with Pioneer Mindset to try to bring these issues up. But then Pioneer Farmer, that's essentially what we're trying to do, is kill scarcity with clarity. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, but I hope you found value in this, and be sure to check us out with Pioneer Farmer, and like us on social medias, Facebook, Instagram, and definitely reach out if you're in the fog and in the thick of things and need some help. That's what we're here for. That's what I'm here for. That's what I provide. That I find value in doing, is find value in helping others, and that's what we're here for. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and we will catch you next time. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share, or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram at Garrett Ruskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.